right. Well, we are excited to have Jeff, and with a nice little start that Jim prompted Jeff not to it up. So there we are.
This is my life. As an Enneagram 1, that's the mantra going through my head constantly. So it's not new.
That didn't help, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just cracks a little bit of the, brings a little humor in there, so we can approach this with kind of a relaxed approach here. Look, we're gonna have fun either way, right? This is we've enjoyed getting to know you, Jeff, and it has been a privilege and honor really to do that. But we brought you on because we want to talk about wisdom, and that's kind of up your alley, isn't it? You're a professor of philosophy.
That's right.
And I'm curious about what even got you started into this sort of love of wisdom, the pursuit of wisdom, where there's sort of curiosities that you began early on, like interest in that because of something. Was there some deeper questions, some pursuits inside you that you wanted to know more? And I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, in the academy, if you study like anthropology, it's anthro, man, logos, ology, and sociology, etc. The philosophy is philo, the love, the brotherly love, the communal, the shoulder to shoulder. We're gonna take a hill love of Sophia. Wisdom. And so I'm a Enneagram 1. I'm thinking repressed, and the way that I get past that thinking repression is through systems. I outsource a lot of my thinking to systems that I spend a ton of time trying to internalize, because that's just a place I need to shore up myself. And so they just naturally gravitated to this topic. But it also hits a lot of my, the things that I really buzz about, right and wrong, good and bad, what the nature of the universe is, how we know things. And, the more I get into Enneagram, like what are the motivations that I have and how do they color how I perceive everything and the way that I interact with others. And so philosophy just kind of takes all of that. It's the foundation of all knowledge. So if you get a PhD, it's a philosophy doctorate. You have the doctrine of your field at the philosophical level. And so I'd love the hell out of that foundational approach to knowing.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's more than just knowledge, right? This is not acquisition of knowledge. But I'm sure, I mean, when you first start out in school, that, college and then, post-grad work, it is a lot about learning and about acquiring knowledge. But philosophy invites you into something deeper. How would you frame that?
Yeah. So where other disciplines might be saying, what do we know about X, Y, and Z? Philosophy is asking the question, what is knowledge itself? What constitutes knowledge? If you say this is a fact, what are the theories for facthood itself? And so you're going at those very foundational levels of pursuing that sort of understanding of the knowing process.
So you address even frameworks of thought, like the how do you know what you know, but what is your sort of lens through which you see, right? So, and that also is probably what interested you, at least my guess is in the Enneagram, because it does start to demonstrate like, oh, you're seeing through a particular lens for sure, and it's your type. And then there's all sorts of other lenses that get layered on as well.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So philosophy could be associated with other words that we use, like paradigm or religion. The perspectives by which we understand everything else. And what Enneagram does, which I think that human motive is so core that it really influences how we see the world. And if you can't name how you are seeing the world and your biases through your motive, there is a degree of ignorance that you have in coming to the world. So it's one thing that really is worth saying is that it's an epistemic filter for what we think is knowable and the rest, and it's really worth naming. So for example, if you were to go through like the catalog of philosophers, I can by this point in time probably give you a good sense of what their Enneagram type is and why their motive is pitching what they are pitching, and why that whole filter that they're embracing is coming out of their motive. Because so often the filters that we put on, the glasses we put on, the reason we put on those glasses philosophically is because of the motive underlying that.
Right.
That is so true.
And then we end up in this discussion endlessly about the thing we're looking at. And we're missing what, Thoreau says, that the question is not what you look at, it's what you see. and you find what you're looking for. And so I think we always are starting at the branches and then missing the root. And so I love that you have this deep concern with like, no, let's look at the root first and then understand that we're looking at the external from this source originally. And so much of when I see people really missing it, and it could be in any of the realms you just mentioned, philosophically, from a theological, religious perspective, whatever it is. And I have joked that like when I hear people speak, you can hear their type once you get steeped into it to the extent that we are. And you're going, oh, but we're just talking about that thing out there about what we see, but we're missing the why we see it that way.
I listened to these two that were doing this. That's two of my favorites. YouTube, brilliant minds. One's a cognitive scientist, the other one's a psychologist. But one of them clearly is a type 1. The other one's clearly a 5. And the type 1 is like, but this is a moral issue.
Right.
And the type 5 goes, I don't think so. I think it's a meaning issue. And I was like, this is absolutely brilliant. Like, we're seeing this on display. And I'm thinking, for all of the depth that the two of them give to the world, it's like, but even the awareness of your Enneagram type could be helpful here, because you're leading with a moral framework. You're looking at the world that way. The other one's looking at it in a completely different way. And but they were at least open to listening and learning from each other. But that was a remarkable moment of seeing type very, very clearly displayed when they're talking about the subject of wisdom.
Yep. Yeah. If you were to ask somebody who is in academics, what did you do your dissertation on and why? You're going to see motive all day long, all day long. And it's going to come out of their core. This is my passion. I'm going to put 3 years into this. Well, why are you doing it? And there it is. So,
there's a whole thing of today, as we think about the issues on politics, religion are kind of the big things right now that are kind of shaping the public discourse. It seems like everybody is either talking about one or the other. And there is a sort of like curation of facts, and people are sure that the facts that they see are self-explanatory. There's no awareness of the act of curating the facts themselves. And the same thing goes with one of my triggers is when I hear someone say from the religious, particularly the evangelical Christian world, like, well, the Bible says, and it's very clear what the Bible says. And I think to myself, and even right now there's a discussion, and I'm on a thread, there's this big brouhaha going on in a denomination I was part of, and they're dealing with some corruption and some major issues going on in certain churches. And they're coming back to this whole thing of like, well, everything has to be based and rooted in the Bible. And no one is bringing up the point that like, that cannot be the base, because it's what you just said, Jim. It's like, it's not what you're looking at, it's how you see.
Yeah.
Yep.
And didn't you have one of your teachers, Joel, was the one who said, even talking about this, had the awareness to say it's a fiddle. You can play any tune you want on it.
Yeah.
So they're even pointing out the fact that there is a way that we're perceiving and seeing all of this, right?
Yeah, you can have an inerrant Bible. What you don't have is an inerrant set of glasses. This is why when you go to seminary, you study hermeneutics. But apparently we've lost the art of how to read the scriptures and even talk philosophically about the wide range of different ways that you can come to reading the scriptures. And that applies to the Bible, but it applies to reality. It applies to nearly everything. Again, glasses matter, and if you can't name that, you're naive.
Well, I think you made
level.
I loved your definition of philosophy. It's one of my favorites, the way you described it. It's like the philo being the shoulder to shoulder, brotherly love, camaraderie. We're together in this journey of discovering, and I think that that's a big missing component in anything that we're doing. Is that it's how we approach. I've said before, it's not how, for those who are really into evangelicalism and Christianity and reading the Bible, it's not so much how you read or what you're reading in terms of the Bible. It's how it's reading back to you and how it's reading you. And that's the dialogos. That's the coming together of this sort of, okay, what's the interaction now between myself and the thing I'm looking at? What is it revealing about me? What am I seeing? What's it revealing about me? And I think it applies in that Philo way of also, what's this individual doing? What's the reaction I'm having to what I'm hearing? And being able to be okay with that and not have this sort of shutting down, locking down, and having a tunnel vision of, I have to prove my point. I have to be right. I can't be affected by this. There's a fear that kicks in, I think, for people when we're talking about these, high stakes kind of topics.
Agreed. Yeah. Am I reading this text in order to prove I'm right? Am I reading it to get arguments so I can control other people? Am I reading it in order to justify my political views? Or am I reading it in order to actually see myself develop as a human being, to grow, to change, to catch up to where God's already way in front of me? And those are vastly different priorities when coming to your, whatever spiritual tradition you're in. Like, how are you engaging that with intentionality?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even paying attention to like what you underline. I always remember this Christian artist I heard years ago, Rich Mullins. He's like, I've noticed that when I go to different places around the world, that different people underline different things in the Bible. And, when people have quotes around their house, like they have different ones. And maybe certain authors, because of their type, speak to them, or we're attracted to different things because of that. I don't know. It's just kind of like we can't get away from this. The only and we're not saying that this is a problem. Like this is a natural thing, and I think I want to clarify that point, because we're not talking down about that at all. We're just saying it requires an awareness, not a correction.
That's very good, Jim. Yes, I love that. Awareness, not necessarily correction.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, I want to talk to you about it. We're going to call this episode The Wisdom of Desire. Joel's been talking to me for a while, the last several months especially, about talking about how the type 1, they have to be in tune with their desire. That if they're not, it's very hard for them to actually walk in the world. And when I was looking at the new Around the Circle book that you and TJ worked on, and I'm reading some of the quotes at the beginning, it's like, oh, the way you're talking about desire and meaning and every person needing to know their desire, I was like, yes, this is something that I think your unique voice is really great. First off, I think from what I've seen so far, the samples you sent us, I think it's absolutely brilliant. I love how you use these little stories, and you use where you come from, like wisdom stories and parables, to lay out the foundations of the Enneagram. I think this is actually going to be an amazing primer for people to get into it, just from the little I've seen so far. But I like how you're starting at looking at the lens. And there was a quote right from the beginning that I was like, I don't totally get that. I want Jeff to talk about that quote, the Arthur Schopenhauer one, where he says, a man can choose what he wants, but he cannot want what he wants.
Yep. So this is, in philosophy, this is called compatibilism. You have libertarian free will or total determinism, but there's a middle ground, which is Schopenhauer's view of compatibilism. That is, you can act on your desires with total freedom, but you cannot create your desires. Your desires are hardwired into you at some foundational levels. We've already been talking about God. I like the idea that God has created me with the framework that I presently have, the desires that I presently have, and that I get to live as a free person out of the being that God was pleased to make. You don't have to have that view. You can come from any view. But at some level, we are unable to desire something else for our desires without desiring it in the first place. Like the desires have
that
to
again?
the desires have to, if you want to change yourself,
Okay.
that's going to come out of your desires. And so even the desire to change your desires comes out of those original desires that you're trying to change. So at some level, you can do what you want, but you can't want what you want. And so that's Schopenhauer's view. It's something to wrestle with. But what is fantastic is if you jump into that view, that your desires have been handed to you as a gift, you can choose to honor that gift, or you can choose to war against that gift. And we've talked about this on my show when you guys were on. Like, sometimes just embracing who you are and elevating it as a gift, as something beautiful, and is actually a great way to go here, as opposed to saying my ego is the problem, my desires are the problem, I need to reduce myself to nothing. I really like the other idea that perhaps it's the case that you, your type, your desires are actually good and can flourish and will lead to your healthiest self.
Yeah. I love a lot of what you're saying here. Well, I love it all. For clarification for people who might be listening, saying, "Well, geez, I think there are people that have desires that are not really good,
Yeah.
that have led them into doing some pretty damaging things in relationships or to themselves." You don't mean in that sort of narrow sense of desire. You're looking at there's a deeper underlying desire there that's perhaps not being met at a more pure level, and then there's the sort of superficiality of those desires that then get manifested. Sort of like, I'm hungry and I'm grabbing at candy. Well, that's a desire, but that's not necessarily the most nourishing thing. That there might be something more nourishing. Or say it the way you would, how you would say it.
So what I would say on this front is Enneagram often hits two big topics in philosophy. There's really three foundations to all knowledge. It's metaphysics, which is what's reality like, epistemology, which is how do we know things, and ethics, which is about value judgments and how we talk about good and bad, right and wrong. With Enneagram, it hits those last two topics about knowing things and what we should do about it. In my view, when coming to the idea of whether or not a desire is good or bad, is healthy or not, you need to assess that. So how are you going to assess that? My own view is I push into virtue. You guys are talking about wisdom. Wisdom is part of the virtue tradition. The question for virtue is, what is the function of a human being? What are you made for? And if you can put your thumb on what you're made for, what the target is, then you can start to assess in a different kind of way. Are you becoming the sort of person who is going to hit that target? I'm an Aristotelian on this front. Aristotle says the target is happiness. I think that's right. Are you becoming the sort of person who habitually does the sorts of things that makes you more happy? And if you are, that's a healthy, you are engaging your desires in a good and healthy way. If you are consistently making choices that make yourself miserable, make the people around you miserable, then clearly your desires are askew. You're not creating the habits that lead to a happy life. And so this is how I would wrestle with desires. We all have desires. The question ends up being, are they making you a flourishing human being that makes yourself flourish, the people around you flourish? Those are the places that value judgment starts. I could talk about that for days, but that's
critical.
The foundation.
That's critical. Virtue. So we finished our last podcast with Tyler
Zach. Yes. Yeah.
Tyler Zach. Yeah, it was really cool. And we finished with virtue. And that to me is definitely the aim. Otherwise, there's no trajectory for your wisdom. Mm-hmm. What's the point of wisdom if it doesn't have an aim? Maybe an ontos and an aim as well. It's sort of like you're genuinely made this particular way, but you can transgress that for sure and go in a different direction. But I find that with the Enneagram, there isn't really a clarity even around virtue. I think it could be expounded more, mm-hmm. and I think that's what you're trying to do, which is really good. Because we do need to have that. And again, a plug for your book. It's aimed in that direction. I can feel it through the book. Like there's an attention towards that virtue. It underlies a lot of what you're doing. Could you name some virtues that can be orienting to us in our lives?
Of all things, you're going to give me an opportunity to talk about some stuff I haven't gotten on paper yet, but this is the book that we're releasing in June is called Around the Circle. It's the first of 5 books. The last book is going to be on happiness. And I'm really going to pick up the idea of virtue there. So 4 years from now, we'll publish on this. But to go to the Greek tradition, the ideas of wisdom, moderation, and courage are great places to start when talking about the Enneagram because they overlap fairly severely with our centers. So wisdom is a mental virtue. Plato wants to talk about this being. This is what the mind fully alive looks like. It's characterized by the excellence of wisdom. Virtue is a Latin term for excellence. Courage is the virtue of the heart. It's about passion and it's about drive and it's about doing things for the sake of yourself and for others. And then moderation is the virtue that Plato associates with the body, that one of the things that bodies don't do well is extremes. You need to have just the right amount of food, not too much, not too little, right amount of exercise, not too much, not too little, right amount of sleep, etc. When the body, mind, and heart all exercise these virtues, we feel something that is indescribable. It's like I am living my best life. And Plato calls that justice. It's the word that the New Testament writers use for righteousness. It's the word dikaiosune. And the image here is that I'm like in the flow. I'm as I ought to be. Things are just as they should be. That's what justice is about. And so there's something there in terms of virtue in the Enneagram that's worth naming. Like how are you best in your center? So head type, body type. Wisdom is going to look like a certain thing for the 7. Moderation is going to look like a certain thing for the 8. But also, you both have a repressed center. So as 7s and 8s, your repressed center is going to be your feeling center. And what does it look like to get into your emotions in a certain way? I think those can be interesting to me in terms of naming the excellence that you're targeting when doing work.
Let's put a little bit flesh on that, if you could. Maybe some examples around all 3: wisdom, courage, and moderation. You gave you gave a couple for moderation, which I think was really helpful. It's like, yeah, definitely the body, and I think a lot of us relate to that, the excesses.
Let me talk about courage. Courage is virtue at the testing point. Courage is the virtue required to do anything. So courage is not running into a battlefield flailing a sword. Courage is seeing what wisdom is saying and then doing it. It's an execution-oriented excellence. And so it's about getting into movement. But the big idea here being that when talking about the soul is really where Plato wants to go with this, the hearts and passions. He associates courage with the military, but it's because they love their city so much. They're willing to do the hard thing, and that's where courage lands.
I'm fascinated by the concept of courage, not in that sense that you were describing, the sort of run into battlefield. It's kind of a counterphobic approach to life. It's like, oh, just go. You're scared, but just go. And I'm like, no, that's not real courage. And even the word courage, that core word comes from the sort of heart. That's what it means. In French, it's cœur. And so it is, to my mind, full-heartedness. It's the capacity to come at something with your full heart. And that's terrifying. Because especially for those of us who are heart repressed, it is extraordinarily terrifying to do that. We can do bravado. We can do, walk it off, suck it up. We can do that. Lots of us in America can do that, right? We've been taught that pretty well. That's not courage. We can do, hey, jump out of a plane, freaked out. That's not. I mean, it's a type of courage, but it's not. Courage is more of that. Can I go towards this person and full-heartedly love the person, be open and honest and vulnerable about what's going on for me, because that's excellence. And that leads me towards that. So that's what comes up for me as I think about courage.
You got thoughts, Jim?
No, I'd just like to highlight a couple of the things that you said, and we can talk about them from in the desire standpoint, because when we're talking about people's personal identity, and then I think these components then come into that. But I want to go back to that starting point, because one of the things you said in your book, without desire, there is no story. In fact, without desire, there is no identity, no heartbeat, no underlying character to be named. I love that. It's a banger quote right there. And when I hear that, I'm just kind of like, how do you think people get to the point where they can start to discover that? Because then you can start to, I think, express. The ideal is that we can start expressing from our type, our perspective, our desire. We can start expressing our moderation, courage, what courage looks like to that individual, what moderation is necessary for that individual, because it comes in different areas by type and by center, by instinct, and what wisdom looks like when they're trying to be holistic, coming from that, Greeley fourth way, seeing from the outside. So how do you think people even can get in touch with their own desires? Because I've had a number of people who have said, well, like, I know what I don't want, but like
Yeah.
to actually get in touch with what they want, like that's a very difficult task for a lot of people. And so that's why I love that banger quote and it's going, okay, so let's tease out how to do that.
Yeah. Love, I'm really attracted, despite all of its flaws, I'm really attracted to the Christian tradition because Jesus actually elevates desire all over the place in terms of going to people and saying, what do you want? In almost open-ended ways. And there's one of the quotes that we have in the book is from Donald Miller, and he started one of his books saying that, and like, imagine you go to a movie and you watch a movie about a guy who really wants a Volvo, and he spends the next 20 years working to save up so he can buy this Volvo with cash. And you watch this for 2 hours, and at the end, he goes to the lot and picks out a red Volvo and drives off the lot testing the windshield wipers, and it cuts to credits. If you watch that movie, you would stand up and think you were robbed because that's not what you're in it for. But many of us live our lives thinking that our lives are going to be meaningful, trying to live a story that looks like a guy saving up for a Volvo. And perhaps like real life, real flourishing is different than that. And you should push into your desires harder and trying to awaken something. And Jim, you and I know have talked about this extensively on our podcast, but you need to awaken your desires and allow them not to like overwhelm you with the toxic side, but to say, where are my healthiest desires pushing me to the flourishing life, and what's the target look like? And so that both of us, I think, have an affection for that kind of way of approaching life and saying, what's the big thing that like moves me to get up in the morning at 5 and go, and I want to find that, embrace it, name it. Enneagram does a great job kind of being a companion in moving us in those directions, it seems to me.
Yeah, I think, but most of us get caught because we don't necessarily know what we want. You know, you talk about the importance of knowing what we want. You said many of us don't have a healthy sense of who we are because we cannot actually name what we want. Another quote from the book. But in that, I think it's so distracting because there's all these messages that are thrown at us about what you should want. Yep. And so people are feeling this pressure from their parents. Well, here's what you should want. You should want this kind of thing and go into this kind of a field and get this kind of an education. All of their friends are saying you should wear this kind of thing. You know, I have a daughter about to go into 7th grade, and there's all this pressure. You should wear this kind of clothing, and you should wear these kinds of brands, and you should act in this way, and you should use this kind of language and this kind of slang. And there's just so much of the should. It's like, how do we find our way through the noise of the should to the depth of desire?
I love the way you're framing that. Some of the things about other people's prescriptions for us is they can be helpful, but sometimes people want to have power over you and direct you where they want you to go. That's their desire. So Sartre is going to jump into this, that like you're actually surrendering your freedom to other people's will, and that's like actually doing great damage to you as a human soul. So there's something about taking the time to explore your heart, to really take the time and ask yourself what you're made for, what you're wired for. Even it doesn't have to be your whole life. It could be just this next season can be a great exercise for a lot of us. But I think you're right in terms of there's so much message coming from us from so many folks, and yet we seldom pull out our own eyes to look at our own heart and say, yes, but what do you say? What do you want? And that's, I don't know that there's a better question than that. That seems to me the most essential question you can ask yourself is, what do you want?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How do you think you've made the move to discovering that for yourself? Like, was there a point at time where you would say personally you didn't know what you want, you were removed from your own desire, and if so, what was the journey back like?
Well, I think actually Enneagram can expose some of the unhealthy sides of my desire. So like, for example, I brought up dissertations before, but my work in grad school was on a problem in philosophy of religion that about God's existence called divine hiddenness, about like God, it was a disproof of God's existence. And a lot of my reason for jumping into that was defensive. Like, I really want to defend this view that I have. And I'm not sure that that was a healthy move for me. Like, defensiveness is a huge part of my Enneagram type. And I can actually look back now and kind of say, you know, if I got to do this over again, I probably would have done something else because I know more about myself now. And so, like, being able to expose what a healthy desire is and an unhealthy desire, given my Enneagram type, can be really valuable. So presently, given my oneness, I am an improver. I'm really interested in spaces. So I'm targeting a lot of my best energy into places where I do real estate, commercial real estate investment. And I'm really good at that. I don't really enjoy it the way I like other stuff, but I'm really good at it. And one of the things that because I'm good at, I'm like, this is my financial foundation for doing everything else. And the thing that I'm really good at that doesn't pay, you know, is Enneagram work. At least for me. I haven't figured out the secret sauce on the paycheck side here, but I want to engage people where they're at and move them forward a couple clicks. Like, that is a heroin shot for me in the best possible way of, like, just feeling like I'm part of the way that I'm wired and meant to connect with others. It's just kind of moving them a couple steps forward, and prove that I am that being able to name that I'm an improver and that I'm real interested in spaces, this has been very helpful for just kind of unveiling a little bit of my heart to say, you should probably look in this direction. So I suppose that's been some of my internal work in terms of desire. I haven't really said that out loud, so I'm sorry that went for a while.
I love that. No, I love it. I wanted you to kind of wander and kind of go through your own story, because I think that's the individual is the universal, as the artists say. You know, it's have to give the individual explanation of your own experience.
Stellar.
Yeah. Do you have any elaborations, thoughts on that, Joel, as far as, like, even getting in touch with your own desires? And
Well, I do think that there's a journey. I don't know that we get there, you know, when we're young. I think you sort of have to try on different things, and you have different voices that are coming at you. A lot of it when you're younger, you're just experimenting. Do I like this? Does this feel right? You know, there's a little bit of fight inside you, as some have described it, you know, early on in life. We all have this, like, internal fight. And then it starts to change, and, you know, you want more flow than fight. But it doesn't happen overnight, and I do think that the Enneagram can help with pointing out by type the kinds of things that are, at least at the maybe broader level, the larger level, like you're made to improve as a 1. That's a good place to start. And let's look at the instincts, you know, and so you start to see how the instincts play out. And so hunter or sexual types will tend to prefer that one-to-one and seeing improvement happening in that sphere. So now you're starting to aim it a little bit more narrowly towards what that might be. Now, again, there's a broad range of what that could show up as. Some will end up as therapists. Others would not want to do that at all. Some will, you know, maybe end up as financial, you know, having their own financial investment firm where they're working one-on-one with clients and really loving that space. But there's that, and a lot of people do get caught up. I you know, I've heard other type 1s say, you know, I'm really good. I had one client from a company said, you know, I always get accolades for how good I do certain things at work. Frankly, I don't even like the things I'm doing. Like, it was a funny conversation, and I thought, well, that's interesting. You demonstrate a lot of competency, but it's not rewarding. And so, what are the things that you like? And it definitely started to lean far more into his teamer or social instinct as a 1. And that, I think, is a good starting place. Is think about even the sort of, like, core pain or core motivation, you know, the core fear or the core pain. Like, that is an interesting thing. Like the fear for 7 of deprivation, of being without. You know, it points to something rather than looking at the dark side of that and thinking maybe there's something wrong with you, you know, and all 9 types, there's something wrong with us. Something missing, deficient, broken with us. It's, no, maybe not. Maybe what's happening is that's sort of placed in there, you know, as a divine gift and a divine direction of, like, that is the impulse to move you in a direction to create something, to put something good out into the world. And so rather than I'm deprived, is I'm here to throw a party. I'm here to give something good to the world around me.
I feel like that's exactly right. We did a podcast just a little bit ago. It hasn't been released, but it's on Robin Williams. We're talking about heroes. The story came out just recently after Robin Williams' death about how he was calling Spielberg, who he had just done a movie with. Spielberg and he did Hook together, but the next movie they did that Spielberg did was Schindler's List. And Robin Williams made a point to call him weekly and to speak into that space. Because Spielberg was going to some dark places for the rest of us. In terms of an artist exposing real tragedies. And I think Spielberg's a 7. Robin Williams, who I also think is a 7, was meeting him in that space and wanting to pull him for a moment out of the pain, and he's real good at it. And he would do like a little stand up on the phone, as it were, until he got a belly laugh from Spielberg, and then he would hang up. And but there's something about the 7's desire to not experience pain. And then if I love you the way I want to be loved, they are going to pull the rest of us out of this, this trash heap that we can commonly find ourselves in. And I think this is right. I think the avoidances that the Enneagram type normally has may actually may not be a negative, that may actually be a great good to your type, that you're longing to serve other people and help them avoid, some of those things that naturally really hurt you. Anyway, that's what went through my mind.
Yeah. What's interesting with this whole thing around desire to me, because I'm thinking about the different stages of life that I've gone through, and Joel just saying, you have to be kind of older. That's part of the journey. You're experimenting as part of the journey. And saying, I really did experiment with a lot of things. Often the desire was to belong to some group, which meant maybe silencing certain internal desires in order to have that larger desire. And that was something that came up. And when you talk, I like how you talk about it in the book about, you have a line that says, at its best, the Enneagram shows me my heart and details those with a heart like mine flourish.
Yeah.
And I love that, heart like mine flourish. And when I was learning about the Enneagram and realizing that my feeling center was repressed, that I had a hard time getting into my heart or into my emotions, I decided to keep a journal, to write in my journal anything that brought tears to my eyes. Like, what was it that really that brought that emotion up for me? And so I just started writing it down because I wanted to be a student of what was making my heart flourish, what came up for me, and what were the stories that I was proudest of in my life. I think becoming a student of my own story, and what was I proudest of, and started writing this stuff down. And I found this pattern that it was someone who either overcame some really big challenge, or they were like an animating force that helped someone else overcome a big challenge. And I'm like, this is so consistent with the 8, right? And it's so consistent with the desires of my heart. That is something that makes my heart flourish, is to see others excel, to be a part of that story. And I think there is something about getting in touch with that thing that is core. And of course, belonging is important to me. And it's in some of these contexts of belonging that I've been able to then step into this thing of flourishing. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what do you think it means for the heart to flourish, and what have you learned personally about that for yourself and your own heart to flourish?
I love everything you just said. That was spot on in terms of where I connect most as well with Enneagram. I don't care generally about people who dysfunction. I'm not captivated by their stories. I don't like train wrecks, and I avoid, the TMZ culture. I think this is just a waste of all things good right here in the airtime. But finding those people who are heroes, especially in your type, if you find the people who are truly flourishing. So I envision your Enneagram type kind of like a funnel, and the whole world is getting poured into that funnel. And the type is the type 8, the type 7, the type 1 funnel. And the way the world swirls around in it is different depending on the type. In the type 8 funnel, very different from the type 1 funnel. But if I find other type 1s, and I see how they are engaging the world, and I specifically see the ones who are flourishing, who I'm like, that person is living at a level that I long to look like that. That's what I want to find. So the very first quote, as you know in the book, is an acorn thinks something ridiculous when it looks at an oak tree, and yet the thing it believes is entirely true. The acorn believes I'm supposed to look like that. And when I see ones who are thriving, like I can say something to myself, like I can be, like I'm wired. I have everything within me to become similar to the person there. And I just got to do it. And that is energizing to me on that front.
Yeah, there should be self-improvement books written for all 9 types by all 9 types. Like I'm convinced of that too, because it's like I so resonate with that. The 7s in my life that I've observed who are doing 7 right. It's like, yeah, you're calling me to that higher standard. It really is a tough one because it's inspiring though, and it also feels I can imitate it. Right? That's one of the things that's really interesting is how we learn by imitation a lot, and it's like I see how you just did that. And because I recognize the pattern at a higher level, higher octave, I can ascend to that now. I feel like I can get there. But when you have a type who doesn't recognize that they're a type, who are writing about improvement and about how to do, it's like you can pick some of that out of there, but there's a lot that you're just like, that would never work, for me.
Yeah. Well, to plug your work, I mean, the panels kind of get you moving down that space of just hearing other people in your type talking about that. And I mean, there's a topic like, what does it look like for you to flourish? Get the panel together, and I imagine you're going to see some real similar language come out there. So the last which isn't in what I sent you all, is on gifts, and we really tried to elevate that element of where are you flourishing? What do you bring to the table, not only for yourself but for the rest of us? And that's really worth naming.
Maybe as we sort of round the circle, here, we can maybe some things that you wanted to do through this work, your book, as sort of the gift that you would like to give to the world. There's some things that you do in the book that's sort of like, all right, I got to establish these things, because you got to do that. And then there's things like, okay, now here's my hopefully unique contribution to the world of the Enneagram. I'd love to hear that.
The book here is on typology. It's really, here's the Enneagram language. We're going to be speaking a language. And so you kind of have to learn the language, especially the language of yourself and your inner life. And so if you can speak the language of your inner life, then we can do things. So it's almost like I'm handing you a car manual and saying, this is what the car is. You kind of need to know what a steering wheel is. You need to know brake pedals and the rest. But once you get that in your mind and heart, we can drive. And so everything else that we're going to do in these other 4 books is going to be like, we're going some places. And so my deep hope is that we're contributing something new. My deep hope is that we're kind of exposing a little bit more, especially with how each of the types problem solves, how each of the types connect with other people naturally and with their gifts. We spend a lot of time on that sort of stuff. But once you kind of have that in your heart and mind, then Enneagram wise, you can use this tool to go some places. And so that was the hope.
Yeah. You mentioned something about gifts. And I can see your resource points, which is beautiful. That aspirationally, I think we all want to be able to integrate all of our our 3 resource point, or our 2 resource points, and even from the standpoint of harmonics, which I'm a huge fan of, that particularly the harmonic that has the 147 or 141 harmonic. I prefer that 852 528, as well as the obvious 1369 963 and 639. So I can see the 7. You're pulling that into that, like the gifts, the and then the 4 and the beauty and all that. So maybe the inspiration, and you even feel how it felt for you putting something beautiful into the world like this.
One of the best illustrations on that in terms of gifts, to circle back to that, was there was a player in the NFL, this was about 10 years ago, who was by far the slowest guy in the NFL, had the lowest vertical leap, could not tackle people, was just and he was an old guy, and he in 2013 set every record there was for his position that had been established for the last 50 years. And his name's Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning is terrible at football, except for 2 things. He knows how to read a defense, and he knows how to throw an accurate football. And those 2 skills made him the best player in the league. And the thing that we routinely come back to is who you aren't is not interesting, and it's not worth investing in. And if he had spent all of his time learning how to tackle better, how to sprint faster, how to improve that bench press, he would have actually regressed. He would have actually done damage to the rest of his team. The fact that he pushed into his skills in a healthy way actually elevated everything. And they, unfortunately, they lost to Seattle real badly in the Super Bowl that year. But the fact that he pushed into his skills made everything else work, not only for himself, but for those around him. It's incredibly important to see as we've been saying, to look at the gifts of people with your type and see where they thrive and say, I'm supposed to be like that. And so anyway, in the book, we spend quite a bit of time kind of elevating all of the types and their giftedness, and like, this is you at your best. Like, go get it.
Yeah,
That's
it sounds like what
fantastic.
we always say, which is who you most naturally are is what the world most needs from you.
Ooh,
You know,
come on.
It's the
Right.
hardest thing, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you would think that would be so appealing that everybody would do it.
no.
Even, I imagine for both you guys, 7 and 8, you're assertive types. I bet you've heard the language over and over again from people around you that you're too much. You need to pull that back a little bit, you know? And maybe it's the case that there's some guardrails that probably should be put up, but
Yeah.
at some level, like, you know, understanding how to utilize what you have.
Yes.
That's
yes,
the
yes,
art. Like,
Yes,
you
that's
have
the art.
so
Right.
much potential.
Yeah.
So guide that potential into the places channel that potential into places that really make you alive, make you happy, make those around you happy. That's the art of living.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Joel always says, I think it was like first season, he talked about it's not about becoming less of yourself. It's becoming more of yourself with less of your sabotaging patterns. And, you know, growing up, I got like bull in the china shop. You know, I got insensitive. I got,
Yes.
you know, too harsh, whatever. But when I combine the desire to empower and I do reduce the harshness, then all of a sudden I get to thrive in what I'm great at.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, look, desire for all of us, it's like desire for an 8 is to have impact. Right? So one of the things that we do when we coach 8s in corporate America is we say, look, some of you are pulling back on yourselves because you've heard that you're too much, right?
Right.
But you're doing it somewhat begrudgingly. It's not an enjoyable experience of pulling back. And so the question isn't whether you're too much. The question is, are you having the impact you want?
Yeah.
And that's when they go, oh, right, that's a good question. So does it require you to go at this with 10 energy, or does it require you to go at it with 6 energy? If
6 level energy. Yeah.
the 6th level energy, if you get the desired impact, like, what is the impact you seek? And so it's, again, that's the sabotaging piece, is like, no, it's always 10, and that's how we go at life. And then there's but the true deeper desire is to have impact in the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
One that I'm super aware of my desires. I am naturally the most critical of my urges of any of the types. And here's why. And people like me will come to Enneagram. They have a philosophy of Enneagram that says you should do away with your desires. You should
Yes.
minimize your desires. You're not even supposed to be your type. You're supposed to be your security number.
Yeah.
This is terrible advice. And I can say
Yeah.
this is a one
Thank
prescriptive
you.
one that
Thank
I am.
you. Ah!
The
Preach.
what does it look like for you to thrive in your number, and to ask the questions, not our desire, as we started with. Desires aren't good or bad. They are healthy expressions of the desire, or unhealthy. And if you can
Yes.
maximize the healthy elements of your passions, like, you're gonna do so much in the world, because without desire nothing happens.
That's
That's
right.
the big point.
Boom.
That's right.
If there is no story, there are no desires on Mars right now, and nothing is happening, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That's a really
Spot on.
good point. That's a really good point.
Right.
Where there's no desire, nothing is happening. It's the engine, right? It's like,
Yep.
I've said, like, your vision, your passion, your dreams, all of that lies in your heart center. Your head center is the one that plans and thinks and negotiates and all that. And the body center is the one that enacts it.
Yeah.
So whenever someone comes to me and is like, I'm not sure what I want to do with my life. I'm so confused. I'm in my, midlife, and I'm not sure, and I want to pivot, but I don't know what it is that I want. It's like, well, let's start with the heart, right? Because that's
Yeah.
where the desire and that's where the passion and dreams and all of that lives. So
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's great desires that, all of them have, and I want the desires. There's things in every type that I want. So if I just did go around the circle, like I want to be good. I want to be a good person. I want to
That's
like a
right.
2, I
Yeah.
connect with others and have good relationship. The 3, I want to achieve things for sure. For the 4, I want to get in touch with like beauty and depth and meaning. Of course, I want to be like logical and think things through like a 5. I want to be aware of where I am in the world and have good, loyal relationships and be secure like a 6. I want to have fun, enjoy life, be enthusiastic like a 7. I'll skip mine, go to the 9. I want to be in good relationship and harmony with people. I want to be at peace with the world around me. But all of those desires are going to be met along the way of trying to empower people, of trying to encourage people, of trying to lift and build people into who they can be. It's going to follow that one. The rest of them are going to have to follow them, and they're going to be in the context of my true desire. That's
Yes.
where the rest of them will get fulfilled.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
That's home run right there.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I took your idea, Jeff, and then I just went around the circle and just said it for myself. And
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
this is
Thanks,
this
Jeff.
is you. This is a good job,
Tools are
Jeff.
out there to be used for sure. No, at the end of the day, this is a big thing that I want to communicate about Enneagram. This may be more philosophical, but at the end of the day, you have to make choices, and you're going to make hard choices between do I want to go here or go there, and it's going to drive you toward what do you want most, and that's the place that has to be healthy.
Yeah.
And if you haven't named that, if you haven't engaged that, if you haven't spent the time in that space, you're going to come to the crossroads of your life. And perhaps the opinions of the masses, the opinions that you see just kicked out helter-skelter on television or your parents' voices in your head saying something, you're not going to push into what you want, what you're wired for.
Yeah.
And what a loss
Right.
that you're going to actually make the choices based on something that isn't really that core element of yourself.
Yeah.
And of course, listen, as we wrap up, to those folks listening, we understand the complexity, that there are many complexities. We don't understand your complexity particularly, but we understand there are massive complexities in all of our lives here for everyone that's listening to this. So we're not saying this is an easy thing to do, like just go after your desire. But I believe in a North Star. And if we have a North Star, then we can start moving towards that. And I would highly recommend, I'd love to hear your recommendations, Jeff, as well, but I would highly recommend reaching out to others that can help you journey in that way. Like, I am a massive believer in having a community that believes in you, like people that believe the best about you and want the best for you. It's almost impossible to really grow without that. I think you can do it, but it's a slog and it's slow. But when you have companions, you can go a lot further. What else would you say would be helpful to folks at a sort of, larger meta level of like, what are some steps that they can take towards that?
I would love to double down on that. Just to circle back to Aristotle. Aristotle says there's 3 forms of friendship. It's the friendships that are based on utility. Like, I get something from you, you get something from me. Kind of thin, surface level. There's others that are based on pleasure. Like you're into Pearl Jam, I'm into Pearl Jam. You like knitting doilies? Man, I am a doily knitter. But the third, the highest level, the most grounded level is friendships that are based on virtue. And to come to this, like when virtue is the thing at the center of your relationship and you're both targeting the good life, you're both targeting the happy life, what ends up happening is something magical. And that, for us, in our second book, we're going to go through what we call the steps. But our first step is know your type. Your second step is like talk to somebody about this, like find a friend. You need somebody that you can journey with in knowledge of these sorts of things, who's really passionate as well. So I imagine you guys have had this relationship. You got into Enneagram together, and then all of a sudden you're growing together with it and challenging each other, pushing each other. And this is what I'm learning. That is one of the treasures of life. So second step is talk with others about these sorts of things. And if you find other people who are passionate about doing something with their life that's big, like you want to maximize those relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And to go along with that, there's also certain kinds of relationships you don't want to have
Yes.
a ton of having a big impact on your life. And being aware of the kinds of relationships that are always telling you to be something that you're not, and the kinds of relationships that are always limiting you and trying to say, well, who do you think you are, or just too small, like keeping you small. I think either of those, that's just not what we want. Which is why I'm advocating for what you're saying. I 100% agree, but just also watch out for the alternative to that,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
that
yeah.
has
Exactly
probably
right.
limited just as many people as anything.
Yeah.
It's that category of healthy just gets applied to relationships. Are these healthy relationships? Or are they unhealthy relationships?
Yeah. Yeah.
For exactly that reason.
Yeah.
Well, it's also what you consume too. It's like in general, like what are you consuming? What are you watching? Are you watching daytime TV? Are you watching, commentators who are negative and who are always, there's always anger and frustration that's coming through the airwaves? Are
Right.
you watching YouTube stuff that's on conspiracies that's creating more anxiety inside you than peace? And so there's a lot of that. I've really I'm a huge believer in curating. What is it that's going to help you and inspire you and give you more hope and give you more, I feel more alive. I feel more, So those are, I think, recognize what are you consuming?
Need to get some more Art of Growth podcasts in your system.
That's right. It's the prescription for everything.
Well, Jeff. I just want to thank you so much for this time. This has been just an incredible conversation. I think a lot of what you are saying about this kind of work, doing about this, is just something that we really value and learn from. And we are both on the Ennea Summit. Both of us are part of that. On the Instincts is coming up in June. And so tell people where they can. I'll put a link in the show notes to whatever you want us to put a link in the show notes to that points to your work, but also this book is coming out when?
It's coming out June 20th if I get all the things in place, and it'll be available. It's going to be exclusively on Amazon, but all the links to all of our stuff is at aroundthecircle.org. This year we're going to be putting up quite a few college style classes that kind of follow the material in the book and go some other places. I'm excited about that.
Very cool.
Yeah, and just any events. We occasionally will end up having Zoom classes where we interact as well if you get into our stuff.
Very cool.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jeff. This has been a really phenomenal conversation, and we really appreciate your contribution to the Enneagram world and to the world in general, and to this conversation about getting us more in touch with the wisdom of our own desires. So really a huge thanks to you, Jeff.
Yeah, I want to mirror that. You gentlemen are fantastic and challenge me. So I appreciate you all.
Thank you.